Hey, I'm Christie Friesen, and guess what? I'm here at the Cool Tool Studio, and I want to show you a really fun little project. Now, this incorporates polymer clay and Swellegant. What we're going to do is we're going to take polymer clay, we're going to make a little freeform bezel around, well, this is a pearl, but you could use a stone or a dichro cab or whatever amuses you. And then after it's baked, we're going to put Swellegant on it to make it look like aged metal. So this is a way, if you don't already work with metal or metal clay, this is a way to make a metal looking, and it actually has metal coating on it, a metal bezel around something with very inexpensive materials, and you're going to have a blast. Doesn't that sound like fun? So this is sort of the direction we're going to go in. Now this is the pearl, and it's got the polymer around it, and it's got Swellegant. It's not done yet. Once we're all finished with this Swellegant, some of that bronze will come back up, but I wanted to show you the direction you're going to be headed in. So what you're going to need in order to do the project we're doing is something to build around. I just used some Mabe pearls here, but like I said, you could use dichro or a glass or stone cab or whatever. Then you're going to need some polymer clay. Now, it doesn't matter what color you use because it's all going to get covered with the metal coating, which is a paint. So some polymer clay, conditioned, soft, ready to use. And we only need a few tools. I suggest a roller because a roller will help you make it flat. But, you know, you could use a wine bottle. Obviously, you'd have to drink the wine first, so, you know, whatever. But to use something to roll it flat. And then a variety of tools. There's a cutting blade or an X-Acto knife. Either one works fantastic. It's one of those tools in your toolkit that are indispensable. And then I have an assortment of sculpting tools here that are my favorites. These are from my own product line called the CF Sculpting Tools, and they're just terrific. So if you have to just pick one, this Wow It's Awesome tool is awesome. But if you don't have those, there are plastic tools around, which are not my favorite, but they can work. There's wooden tools. You can use toothpicks. You can use just random things you find around the house to help smooth out what you're doing. But most of it is going to be this right here, your fingers. That's your most important tool. All right, so gather up your goodies and we'll get started. Okay, so polymer clay. First thing you're going to want to do is condition it. And you can see how soft and flexible this is. If you have some polymer clay and you bend it, and you don't get any cracks along that bend, it's conditioned. But essentially all you're going to do is hand manipulate it to soften it up, or roll it with your roller, or put it through a pasta machine. That's the best ways to condition. Once you have got a nice conditioned piece, I'm going to roll this out into a flat background. This is going to be the base for your little pendant. So you don't need it to be very thick. I'd say about as thick as, a nickel or a dime, somewhere in there is plenty. So I'm going to lay that down, and then I'm going to take my whatever that's going to be covered, in this case it's a little pearl, and just lay that down in the center. Now, because I don't need quite so much goo all over the place, I am going to trim away the excess, because I don't need all that. Now, it's not a perfect trim. We'll be trimming it a little tighter later, but that's good enough. Decide which is up and down, you know, because there's probably a top or a bottom. You may not know at first which one is the top and bottom, but by the time you're done, hopefully you'll have an idea. So all I'm doing is I'm rolling out like a snake of clay. The idea is to kind of use your clay to hold this into position without making it just look like, you know, it's stepped in gum and it's got a big gunk around it. So what I'm doing is with this little snake, you see how I'm sort of tucking it in place and going around it in an artistic and decorative way. So I'm just going to kind of flow around it and press as I go. The nice thing about polymer is you don't have to do cross hatching, you don't have to use slip, you don't have to do anything to make it stick to itself. It's one of the beauties of working with this particular kind of clay, is it just grabs, so it's no problem. And I'm going to see how I've kind of got that over on top of my piece. I felt like that was the artistic decision I wanted to make right there. So I'm just kind of using my piece to dictate how this flowing arrangement will go. Now you can do this as much or as little as you want. You can use little dots of clay, snakes of clay, whatever makes you happy. All right, so now I've got all of these nice little arrangements. I'm going to look at it and go, well, this area right here sickens me. So let's fix that. Let's put a little blob right in there to make that look just a little bit more fun and a little bit more here. Doesn't that look good? So you just get to build up all the goodies. And there's another reason for this. Anytime you've got little indentations, things that stick up, things that recede, that's where all of your patina and your dye is going to go. And since that's what we're ultimately doing with this, the more places for that to land, the better. All right, now take a look. So I've got everything done, and there's little bits of ugly bits hanging out that we don't want. So let's get in there with our blade. You could also use a needle tool or a toothpick if you wanted to. And you see how I'm kind of cutting at an angle? I'm kind of edging it like this. That will just make the whole thing finish a little nicer. Turn it around. I'm working on a tile. It's always nice to work on a tile, but you could also work on just a little piece of paper, like a cardstock paper or an old manila folder. Those work really well too, just to play with your clay. And let's move that around. Just get it in there, look it pretty. Almost done. So see, as I'm taking away the background, now you could leave it there if you liked it. I didn't like it, so I'm taking mine away. But now all of my decorative stuff can show. Now I have to decide which is top and which is bottom. Let's take a little look. I feel like that's nicer. Now I'm going to go back with one of the tools. Remember I told you this was the Wow It's Awesome tool? Because wow, look at that. Isn't that awesome? I can just come now and do some little lines. Again, this is another place where some of those dyes and patinas will land and look even more betterer, which is the technical term. So now I've got some nice fun bits all around. In order to make a hanging pendant, you can embed wire into here by just pressing it into the clay, and I usually make a little indentation, sorry, not an indentation, but a bend at the end of the wire if I'm going to do that to keep it in place. But we're just going to make a hanger directly with the clay, because then it can also be covered with Swellegant, and that will look amazing. All right, so here's another snake, and I think we're going to go with this still as the top. I'm going to press that into position, make sure that this is thick enough to be sturdy. You don't want to have a tiny little thin piece, even though that might look good, it doesn't give you enough strength for wear and tear. So I'm using my tool to kind of press it, make sure it's grabbed on really nicely. And again, a couple little lines for texture. How do you feel about that? Doesn't that look fun? All right, so now this piece is going to need to be baked. And you can bake it directly on the paper or the tile that you're working on. Just make sure everything looks nice and put it in the oven. Now, how to bake that is going to be written on the clay that you use. There's baking instructions so far as temperature and time, but I will tell you that what you absolutely have to do is make sure you have preheated your oven. All right, so preheat to that recommended temperature, pop this baby in for the recommended time, usually about 45 minutes, and then once it completely cools, it'll be hardened and ready for the next fun step, which is turning it into a faux metal bezel. Cool, right? Okay, so we've gotten our bezel out of the oven. It's ready for the next step. So we're going to turn that from just a lovely polymer piece into a fantastic metallicious piece. Let's walk through those steps. Okay, I'm going to use the bronze Swellegant. I like the dark metal. It's going to contrast nicely with what we've got going on. And my gloves are on and ready. I have been playing, so I am ready to begin to paint. Now this one's a little trickier because you can't just blop it on really quickly. You've got to go all around your pieces. So what you want to do is you want to have at least one coating on, dry that, and then a second coating. That makes sure that any little gaps are covered. There's no messy areas. It's all beautiful. Just coat the whole thing. And then if you don't want to wait for paint to dry, because who wants to, then you can use a heat gun and speed that baby up a little bit. All right, I'm going to paint all this, dry it, and then paint a second coating. Then we'll begin the patina process. Okay, so we're going to put our final coating on, and then immediately we're going to use this Tiffany patina to start the bloom process. So the thing is, with this Swellegant, it is encased. It's like pulverized metal, and it's encased in like a clear acrylic base, which means once that starts to dry, it's protecting the metal, which means the patina can't get at it. which means you've got to work quickly. So get your your metal. Get your metal on there quickly, so that way we can immediately flood it with patina while the metal is still moist and go from there. Okay, we've got a good coating on. There's a number of ways that you can put the patina on. I'm a fan of just taking a big brush and just sort of flooding it by dabbing it on. That gives it lots of patina. You can also use a little spritzer mister bottle and spritz it on. That's the way to use a little less, and it's still quite good, very effective. But I like lots of stuff. More is better. So don't worry if it gets on the cabochon or the pearl in the middle. It's not going to hurt anything. Just make sure you've covered it well. Then you just let it do its magic. So the metal coating and the patina interact, and that is causing the oxidation. That's doing what nature would do. If you took this baby and it was made out of actual bronze and you set it out in the rainforest somewhere and just let it rust and oxidize, come back in a few weeks or a month, depending on how moist it was, and it would be all that beautiful green. Well, we're doing that in a bottle fast. So that's what's happening, chemical reaction. And first you're going to start with this sort of ugly sludge, and then it'll get kind of like sewage, and you're like, how much did I pay for that? And then just wait, because pretty soon that bloom gets greener and greener and prettier, and then you will have a whole big green thing, which you'll also go, that's not what I wanted, but that's okay, because we have one last little trick at the end that just makes everything perfect. So you've got it now. The patina is reacting. You're just going to set it aside and let it do its thing. It takes at least 5 minutes or so for the reaction to start. As you can see here, it's already darker. And then as we go half an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, that will just keep working and working. If you live in a place that's very warm, you may want to take a paper towel, get it wet, wring it out, and put it over the top like a little humidor. That will help your patina process bloom better by keeping the humidity and keeping everything moist and interactive. If you do this and nothing happens, it means that the coating got too dry. No worries, just give it another coat and do it again. All right, we're going to leave that alone, and we'll come back and revisit it once it's all patinaed. Okay, so we've let our patina bloom overnight. Let's take a look and see what happened. Wow, doesn't that look fantastic? I mean, this feels so oceany, doesn't it? Now, there's a little bit much of it, so we're gonna do something to kind of bring that metal back up. But you notice that there's also a little bit of patina around your pearls, maybe where you don't want them. Just get a Q-tip with a little bit of water and you can clean up around there and brighten that whole thing up. Should be no problem. Okay, so now we did this with bronze. So we're gonna go back to our bronze and we're gonna make a paste. And this is such a fun little trick. I'm taking just a little bit of that bronze metal coating and rubbing it onto my paper towel to take away the excess moisture. Then with my fingertip, I'm just gonna rub on the surface to hit the surface bits. Now, if this was actually made out of metal, what you would do normally would just go to your Dremel or your sandpaper or your grinding wheel, and you would grind or buff off any excess patina so that you can let your metal show through. But this is a metal coating. It's a rather thin bit of metal, and if we did that, pretty soon we'd grind right through it and we'd be down to polymer, and then it would look ridiculous. So by doing this, we're making the same effect, but we're actually adding more metal instead of taking away. All right, so take a look. Doesn't that look fun? So we now have a little bit of that bronze peeking in. I like to just let that air dry or hit it with the heat gun and then do it again and maybe again. The more layers of the bronze that I put in there, the more that metal will just glow and come alive. So don't be afraid to keep going back and touching it up. The other nice thing is because this has lasted overnight, the blooming process has completed. It really is kind of done. If I had only waited about an hour or so, putting this new metal on, that patina would be like, oh, yay, more food, and it would just go up and everything would patina again. So letting it dry overnight is terrific. The same thing with hitting it with the heat gun, because then it just kind of makes sure that process is stopped and what you see is what you get. All right, so there, everything is done right there besides a little bit of cleanup, and we're ready to do the last step. So there's only one step left now, and that is to put the sealant on it. There's a couple different products that you can use. I love to use my Swellegant sealant. It's got a matte finish, so when you have things like this that have age to them, you don't really want to add anything shiny. So this is terrific to use. And there, you can also use something like Renaissance wax. That's another really good one. The thing to remember when you're putting on whatever coating, couple of things. First of all, something like this that has pearls, normally I'd put it in a mister bottle bottle and just spray it. But you don't want to spray when you've got other embellishments in there, because as the varnish or the sealant or whatever gets on those things, it actually makes them more dull. So you definitely want to kind of hand do with a brush or a Q-tip all around the edges. The other thing to remember is, are any of the things you've used still water soluble? The dyes, if you didn't add sealant to them when you were working with them, can move around once they get moist again. Now, we didn't do anything with the dyes in this one. The metals, they dry like acrylic paint. They're not going anywhere. The patinas are a surface treatment, but they tend to stay put pretty well. They kind of have grabbed onto the metal and formed a loving, lusting relationship, so they're not going anywhere. That means you have a lot more choices. But you just want to stay away from spray and maybe just use a Q-tip or something so that you can control where you put it. So I'm just going to dip into here and get a little Q-tip's worth on here, because you want a very, very light coating. You don't want it to get gunky. Anything where it pools up is going to stay sort of milky when it dries, which we don't want. And you notice how far a Q-tip's worth is going to go. So I'm just spreading it over the whole surface, and normally I would flip it over and do the back as well and do the sides. And you let that dry or hit it with a heat gun and maybe give it a second coating. The more coatings that you put on, the more durable that's going to be for jewelry wear. All of the patinas are on the surface, which means if you wear them without protecting it, you're going to get that on your skin or your clothing, which is just not as exciting as it sounds. So you definitely want to seal that. And the more sealings that you put on, just the more durable and strong that is. All right, so there you go. What do you think? Looking pretty good, huh? So your pendant is done and ready to wear. I do have another thing to tell you about that. Because the metal coatings are a surface thing, you've painted them on. If you put like a chain or something like that that's going to have a lot of rub, you're going to wear through that coating. Same thing with polymer. It's a fairly soft material. It's like a softer plastic, so if you have something that's continually rubbing and rubbing, it is going to have a bit of a problem. So I suggest that you consider using a ribbon or cord or leather or something like that that's tied directly onto the pendant loop when you string it up into a necklace or whatever you're going to do with it. Or if you use a jump ring, maybe you use one of the rubber coated jump rings, something that's a little less friction on your piece, and then you can go from there. And it'll be fun. You can wear it and you can show it off to your friends, and I know you're probably going to want to make a crop of them because everybody is going to need one. So just get ready, get your stuff out, and be ready to roll, because they're all going to want one.
Visit our Learning Center at cooltools.us for more cool jewelry making videos. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and be sure to sign up for our email list to be the first to hear about new videos, new products, and other cool stuff from Cool Tools.